My ex-wife's new husband, a bank manager, mocked me in front of his friends for not having a Joe. They didn't know I owned the bank they all worked for until I fired them. There's a certain kind of silence that hits you when you realize the universe has a dark sense of humor. The kind where you're drinking alone at a bar and your ex-wife walks in looking like she'd just won the divorce lottery. The Sterling Lounge wasn't exactly a dive, but it wasn't fancy either. Think leather booths, dim lights, overpriced whiskey, and a jazz band that sounded like they were one trumpet solo away from a midlife crisis. I was sitting there nursing a $20 glass of regret when I spotted her, Clara. She hadn't changed much. Still had that perfect posture, the one that said, "I'm better than you, but I'll smile anyway." Her hair was styled like a commercial for expensive shampoo, and her laugh, that fake, airy one, drifted through the room like deja vu I didn't ask for. And then there was him, Brandon Lewis, Mr. Prime Union Bank himself. The man had the kind of face you'd see on a billboard for dental veneers, smooth, smug, and probably paid off in installments. He sat surrounded by his little squad of banker bros, all wearing the same blue suits and gold watches, like a cult for men who thought LinkedIn was a personality. You could tell they were celebrating something because they laughed too loud and too long, the kind of laughter that begged for attention. I sipped my whiskey and pretended to scroll through my phone, but I couldn't help eavesdropping. Brandon was bragging. Of course he was. "We closed the deal, boys. Prime Union's reputation is bulletproof now." He raised his glass, like he'd just single-handedly solved world hunger. His buddies cheered. I swear, if ego had calories, that table would have gained 10 pounds. Then his eyes landed on me. It took him a second. That familiar double take people do when they recognize someone they didn't expect to see thriving. He leaned back in his chair, whispered something to his friend Tom, the kind of whisper you can hear even if you can't make out the words, and smirked. He stood, holding his glass high. "A toast," he said, his voice loud enough to turn heads, "to men who actually work for a living." Laughter. Real ugly laughter. The kind that scrapes your nerves. Clara giggled too, awkwardly, but she did. My ex-wife laughing at a joke made at my expense. In public, classy, I just smiled. Not the fake kind, the dangerous kind. The one you wear when you already know the punchline, but you're letting everyone enjoy their moment first. I took another sip, felt the whiskey burn down my throat, and thought, this is going to be fun. Because here's what Brandon didn't know. The same bank he worked for, the one he bragged about like it was his firstborn child, belonged to me. 3 months ago, I'd quietly bought Prime Union Bank through my holding company, Reyes Financial Group. The paperwork was clean, the ownership was sealed, and no one outside my inner circle had a clue. Brandon Lewis was quite literally toasting his own boss. I sat there watching him parade around like a stock photo of success, and all I could think was how poetic life could be. This was the same guy who used to comment on my social media posts with passive-aggressive emojis after the divorce. The same guy who told people I lost my spark while he was busy lighting cigars with overdraft fees. "Hey, buddy," he called out across the bar, pretending to just notice me. "You still freelancing or whatever?" He chuckled, and his friends leaned in like middle schoolers waiting for the teacher to scold someone. I tilted my head. "Something like that," I said. "Pays the bills. You know how it is." "Barely," Tom added, earning himself a round of laughter. I grinned. "You're right, times are tough. Maybe I should open a checking account at your bank, huh? I hear they give out free pens now." Brandon chuckled, thinking he'd won. "We might even get you a teller job," he said. "You got the smile for it. Or janitorial," another banker added. "You know, start from the ground up." Clara's smile faltered. "Brandon?" she whispered, tugging his sleeve. But he waved her off, too drunk on arrogance and ego to notice the storm brewing behind my smirk. I raised my glass toward him. "I appreciate the offer. I'll think about it," I said. Then I looked at the bartender, who'd been pretending not to watch the entire exchange. "Another round, please. On me, for our friends here." Brandon beamed, clearly thinking I was trying to buy his approval. He clinked his glass against mine, and the sound was crisp, sharp enough to cut through the jazz in the background. "That's the spirit," he said. The bartender poured. I paid, tipped well, and left the bar without another word. Behind me, I could hear them laughing again, mocking the poor tech guy with nothing better to do. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp, like it wanted to remind me that revenge tastes better when served chilled. I walked toward my car, a matte black Aston Martin that probably cost more than Brandon's yearly bonus, and slid into the driver's seat. The leather still smelled new, just like the start of something dangerous. As I drove through downtown, city lights reflecting off the hood, I couldn't stop smiling. Not the kind of smile that says I'm okay, but the one that says you have no idea what's coming. Because soon, Brandon Lewis, the self-proclaimed star manager, was about to find out that the man he just mocked over whiskey was the one signing his paychecks. It wasn't even about Claire anymore. I'd made peace with that chapter long ago. This was about something else, a poetic balance. Life had handed me a full circle moment, and I wasn't about to waste it. When I got home, I poured myself another drink, the good kind this time, not the overpriced sadness I had at the lounge, and sat by the window overlooking the skyline. The city pulsed with its usual rhythm, ambition, greed, and a hint of desperation. My phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer, James. Board approval finalized. You officially own 72% controlling interest in Prime Union Bank. I chuckled. Perfect timing, I muttered. I typed back, set up a meeting with Patricia Moore. We're going to clean house. James replied instantly. You finally going public with it? Not yet, I wrote. First, I want to see how the rats react when the lights come on. I leaned back, watching the skyline blur through the glass. Somewhere downtown, Brandon was probably raising another glass, bragging about his next big promotion. I hoped he enjoyed it, the last toast of his short-lived kingdom. I finished my drink, smirked at my reflection, and said to no one in particular, to men who actually work for a living. Then I laughed, quietly, slowly. Because in the end, the joke wasn't on me. It never was. It was on the man who thought mockery was power and never noticed the hand holding the strings. By the time I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I already had the next move forming in my mind. Something subtle, surgical, and satisfying. But that's a story for another glass of whiskey. Tonight, it was enough to know that the balance sheet of karma had just been updated, and for once, I was the one approving the audit. If you ever want to test the universe's sense of humor, try being ambitious in a town that worships mediocrity. I grew up in Portland, Oregon. Not the hipster coffee capital you see on travel blogs now, but the older version, where rain came free and judgment came faster. My mom worked 2 jobs, day shift at a bakery, night shift cleaning offices. My dad fixed cars, mostly old Hondas held together by duct tape and prayer. And me? I sold refurbished phones out of a backpack during high school because prom dates didn't come cheap, and neither did Wi-Fi. While my classmates were out playing Who's Most Likely to Fail Econ 101, I was watching YouTube tutorials on how to code and flipping used phones on Craigslist for triple profit. I was that weird kid who could jailbreak your iPhone before lunch and sell it back to you with better apps by 5th period. People in my neighborhood thought ambition was contagious and avoided it like the plague. My best friend Tyler once said, "Bro, relax, you're 17. You don't need to be a billionaire yet." Yeah, tell that to the stack of overdue bills on our kitchen table. While everyone else posted selfies with captions like #FridayFeels, I was posting PayPal invoices. My high school guidance counselor told me to be realistic about college. I told her to be realistic about her haircut. She didn't like me much after that. By 19, I'd saved enough to skip college entirely and dive headfirst into building something of my own. I rented a tiny 1-bedroom apartment that smelled like ambition and burnt ramen. The rent was $700 a month. My desk was an overturned milk crate. My Wi-Fi came from the neighbor's unsecured network. Rex the dog 123. I launched a startup called CoinLink, a fintech app that helped people budget by rounding up their daily purchases and investing the change. Yeah, that's right. While my friends were buying sneakers, I was building algorithms. My social life was a graveyard. My diet was caffeine and instant noodles, and my sleep schedule was a myth. The first version of CoinLink crashed more than a politician's promises, but I learned fast. I taught myself marketing, coding, and how to fake confidence during investor calls. One time, I gave a pitch so convincing, a venture capitalist wired me $50,000 before realizing I didn't even have an office address yet. When he asked, I said, "We're remote first." Cutting edge stuff. He nodded like I'd just invented Zoom. By 25, CoinLink had 300,000 users and a small but loyal cult following. People loved how brutally simple it was. I once got an email from a mom who said, "Your app helped me save for my kids' braces." That was the day I stopped doubting myself and started realizing maybe, just maybe, I was onto something. Then came the acquisition offer, $68 million from a Chicago-based investment firm. I remember sitting on my thrift store couch, staring at the email like it had to be a scam. $68 million. I refreshed the page twice, because you never trust the first read when you've been eating dollar pizza for years. But it was real. I sold. One signature later, I wasn't the broke kid from Portland anymore. I was Elliot Reyes, the 25-year-old tech millionaire with a chip on his shoulder and the IRS on speed dial. You'd think I went wild with the money, right? Nope, no Ferraris, no yachts, no mansion in the hills. I bought my mom a house, paid off my dad's debts, and hired a personal accountant who looked like he hadn't smiled since the Bush administration. The rest I invested, because money's only fun if it multiplies while you sleep. Then came Clara. She was everything I didn't know I needed and everything I should have known better than to want. I met her at a networking mixer downtown, one of those events where everyone wears name tags and pretends they aren't Googling each other under the table. She was studying business administration, working part-time at a cafe, and somehow still managed to look like she stepped out of a magazine. When she smiled, it hit me, like caffeine straight to the heart. She had that mix of intelligence and danger that made you think, this woman could ruin my life, and I'd still say thank you. We started talking over burnt coffee and sarcastic jokes about capitalism. She said she admired how I'd built something out of nothing. I said she made nothing look like everything. Yeah, I was smooth when I wanted to be. We started dating. Late-night ramen became our ritual. I'd code until midnight, she'd quiz herself for exams, and we'd share stories about how we'd take over the world someday. It felt like a partnership, the kind where two dreamers fuel each other's chaos. By 27, we were married. A small ceremony, backyard lights, laughter, and promises we actually believed at the time. For a while, it was perfect. She was my anchor when success started to feel heavy. She celebrated every milestone, from the first million to the 50th. But success has this weird side effect. It doesn't just change you, it changes how people look at you. I started working longer hours, flying out to meetings, negotiating deals. Clara said she understood, but little by little, I could see the shift. The sighs got heavier, the smiles tighter. She started calling me Mr. Workaholic, like it was a cute nickname, but there was always a sting behind it. I'd come home to dinner already eaten, wine glasses already emptied. I thought it was a phase. It wasn't. One night she said, "Elliot, do you even know what day it is?" I panicked. A Tuesday? It was our anniversary. Yeah, I blew it. She didn't yell, she didn't cry. She just went quiet, the kind of quiet that hits harder than any argument. But, see, that's the thing about people who start from nothing. We don't give up easily. I doubled down, tried being more present. Flowers, trips, dinners that cost as much as rent. But you can't buy emotional equity. Eventually, even the nicest gifts start to feel like guilt receipts. Looking back, it wasn't one big fight that ended us. It was death by 1,000 sighs. Every late meeting, every maybe tomorrow, every I'm just tired. Love turned into logistics. Still, when I think about those early days, I don't regret them. Claire taught me something no business school ever could. Success means nothing if you're clapping alone. But she also taught me something else. Some people only love you when you're still climbing. Once you reach the top, they start to resent the view. After the divorce, people asked if I hated her. I didn't. I hated that I let her opinion become my compass. I spent years building an empire out of scraps, only to hand the keys to someone who measured love in hours spent instead of dreams built. But hey, that's life. Some lessons cost more than tuition. So yeah, the rise of a nobody wasn't just about me going from 0 to 68 million. It was about the weird in between. The part where you realize money can fix everything except the people who make you question why you wanted it in the first place. You know the irony? Clara used to joke that she'd marry a banker because they're stable. Fast forward a few years and she did exactly that. Brandon Lewis, the human embodiment of a business card. I saw the engagement announcement on LinkedIn, of all places. She even tagged me in the post, probably by accident. The caption said, "Grateful to be marrying my best friend, my partner in everything." Translation: I finally found someone who leaves work at work. I didn't even comment. I just scrolled past, opened my investment dashboard, and watched my net worth quietly multiply. That's the beauty of silence. It's wealth in disguise. So yeah, that's how the so-called nobody from Portland became the guy who built an empire and lost a marriage in the same decade. I learned to play chess while everyone else was playing checkers. And while Clara was learning how to smile for Christmas cards with her banker husband, I was buying the board they were playing on. Funny thing, everyone thinks success is loud. Sports cars, fancy suits, champagne toasts. But the real power move? It's subtle. It's when the people who underestimated you realize too late that you're the one writing their paychecks. But that's later. Back then, I was just a kid with a laptop, caffeine addiction, and a dream so big it made people uncomfortable. The nobody they once ignored was about to become the ghost in the system, the man who could rewrite the rules without anyone realizing it. If I'd known where it would all lead, maybe I would have taken a vacation, maybe I would have tried harder to save my marriage. But knowing me, probably not. Because while some people chase love, others chase legacy, and I wasn't done climbing yet, not even close. People always say divorce feels like a death, but they never mention it's more like a tax audit with tears. Doesn't happen all at once. It creeps up on you like a bad haircut. You swear it looks fine until one day you catch your reflection in a store window and realize you've been lying to yourself. That's how it was with Clara. It started small. Missed dinners, fake smiles, those little eye rolls that say, "I used to love you, but now you breathe too loud." At first, I thought she was just stressed. Marriage isn't a movie montage. It's messy, loud, and smells like burnt toast half the time. I was working 14-hour days, juggling investments, acquisitions, and enough caffeine to legally qualify as an energy drink. Clara would text me things like, "Dinner?" And I'd reply with, "Can't, deadline." The irony, half the time, and I was the boss. I was the deadline. Then came the comments. Subtle little jabs wrapped in sugar. "You're always on your laptop. Do you ever stop working? Maybe if you looked up once in a while, you'd notice me." I'd laugh it off. "Hey, I notice you. You're blocking the Wi-Fi signal." She didn't laugh. Turns out sarcasm doesn't work well as marriage therapy. One night, we were watching some reality show where couples yelled at each other for prize money, and she said, "At least they're communicating." I said that, "Yeah, but one of them's sleeping on the couch tonight." Guess who that was? Spoiler, it wasn't her. Things escalated from quiet resentment to full-blown emotional Cold War. I'd come home to find her scrolling on her phone, smiling at something that definitely wasn't me. "Who's that?" I'd ask. "Just a friend," she'd say, and that's the moment every husband feels his stomach drop. Just a friend is relationship code for mind your business. By the time our 7th anniversary rolled around, we were strangers sharing a mortgage. I had a business dinner that night that ran late. One of my servers crashed, and not the human kind. I texted her, running behind, "Be home soon." I arrived 45 minutes late, sweating and exhausted, holding flowers that looked like they'd survived a car crash. She was sitting at the table, untouched dinner in front of her, candles half melted. She didn't speak. She didn't yell. She just looked at me like I was a stock that had lost all value. "Clara, I'm sorry," I started, but she cut me off. "No, you're not. You're sorry because you know what comes next." I wish she'd yelled. I wish she'd thrown the wine glass. Instead, she just whispered, "I can't do this anymore." She meant it. The next week, I got a call from her lawyer, a slick guy named Julian Ward. Perfect teeth, perfect tan, perfectly punchable. He spoke like he was billing by the breath. "Mr. Reyes," he said, "Clara would like an amicable separation." Amicable. That's lawyer speak for, "We're about to rob you politely." The divorce was a circus. Her lawyer painted me as an emotionally unavailable workaholic. She said I lived through spreadsheets. The judge nodded like he'd just discovered a new species of villain. I lost the house, half the savings, and worst of all, my espresso machine. That thing had been with me since my ramen and Wi-Fi days. Seeing her carry it out was personal. But the thing about starting from nothing, You learn how to rebuild fast. While Clara was posting self-care selfies on Instagram, I was signing contracts. I poured my focus into my new venture, Reyes Financial Group. I started buying up struggling companies like I was collecting baseball cards. I kept my name off the paperwork. Silent ownership was my new favorite hobby. Then I saw the wedding photos. Clara and Brandon Lewis. The man looked like a discount Ken doll. Perfect hair, shiny smile, and that smug posture of a guy who believes his business card deserves applause. He was a branch manager at Prime Union Bank. Not a CEO, not even regional. Just a guy with a title and a fragile ego. You ever see your ex downgrade and still feel offended? That was me. But hey, people chase comfort, not challenge. Brandon was predictable, available, and had weekends off. I was the opposite of all three. Still, I let it go. Or at least I told myself I did. I focused on work, built my team, invested in clean energy, tech startups, even a coffee chain in Austin. Anything to stay busy. People heal with time. I healed with acquisitions. Then fate, or whatever cosmic comedian writes my life script, decided to twist the knife. I got a call from my CFO one morning. "There's a bank looking for investors," he said. "Mid-sized, mismanaged, hemorrhaging potential." "What bank?" I asked, sipping my coffee. "Prime Union." I nearly spit it out. "You mean that Prime Union? Brandon Lewis's Prime Union?" He laughed. "The same. Their board's desperate. Interested?" Interested? I was practically salivating. That's when I realized revenge doesn't have to be loud. It can wear a suit, sign papers, and shake hands. So I bought the bank. Quietly. Strategically. Through shell companies and holding groups. Brandon didn't even see the storm forming, right over his head. During the acquisition process, I sat across from executives who had no clue the man in the black suit owned their futures. They spoke in jargon, synergy and pipeline, quarterly yield, while I smiled and nodded, thinking, you're all about to get performance reviewed by karma. When the deal closed, I celebrated alone. No champagne, no fireworks, just a quiet smirk and a thought. Life really does have a twisted sense of humor. Of course, I didn't tell anyone. Only two people knew the truth: Patricia Moore, the CEO I decided to keep on board, and James, my lawyer. James was loyal, sharp, and had the kind of dry humor that made bad news sound like a punchline. "So," he said when I told him about the acquisition, "you bought your ex-wife's husband's bank. That's either genius or a cry for therapy." "Maybe both," I said. For the first time in years, I felt something close to satisfaction. Not joy, not revenge, just the quiet calm of knowing you're 3 steps ahead and no one suspects a thing. Then came that night at the Sterling Lounge. The whiskey, the mockery, the bad haircuts. Watching Brandon toast to men who actually work for a living while unknowingly toasting me was poetic. I didn't even need to respond. The universe did the talking for me. When I left that bar, I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Every insult, every smirk, every laugh, those were investments now. And I intended to collect returns. People think power is about control, but it's not. Power is patience. It's sitting quietly while someone digs their own grave and making sure that the shovel's ergonomic. Clara once told me, "You don't know when to stop." She meant it as criticism. Turns out, it was prophecy. In the weeks after that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the irony. The man who mocked me for being a nobody tech guy now had his mortgage, his career, and his retirement tied to my signature. The man who laughed at me for working late, he'd soon find out I never really clocked out. Looking back, I don't think the divorce broke me. It refined me. Like pressure on coal, Clara taught me to see cracks before they appeared. Brandon taught me patience. Together, they created a version of me that didn't need validation, just strategy. So when people asked, what really happened between you two? I just said, market correction. Because that's what it was. She overvalued herself. I diversified, and when her stock crashed, I bought the company she married into. Revenge, I realized, isn't about getting even. It's about making peace with the fact that you already won. You just have to wait for the world to catch up. And oh, it was about to. If I told you how easy it was to buy the bank that employed my ex-wife's husband, you'd probably think I was exaggerating. But trust me, Prime Union Bank was practically begging to be acquired. It was like finding a luxury car with no engine and an owner who still wanted full price. Their books looked fine on the surface, but beneath the numbers, chaos. The fun kind of financial mismanagement that could make Enron blush. That's what drew me in. I'd built Reyes Financial Group to specialize in turnarounds, taking failing companies and giving them new life, preferably while quietly humiliating someone I didn't like along the way. Prime Union fit both requirements perfectly. The bank's board was made up of exactly the type of people who'd attend leadership retreats where everyone drank Merlot and quoted TED Talks. They had no idea who was behind the offer. My holding company, Reyes Financial, was just another faceless entity in a long list of potential investors. When my lawyer James told me the board had voted unanimously to sell, he grinned. You just bought your ex-wife's new husband's career. Care to say a few words to mark the occasion? I raised my coffee. To poetic justice. The deal closed, quietly. No press release, no champagne, no dramatic pen signing for the cameras. I didn't want recognition. I wanted control. Only two people knew the truth. James and Patricia Moore, Prime Union's CEO. Patricia was one of those rare executives who actually understood how numbers and people worked. She'd been trying to reform the company for years, but every time she tried to enforce accountability, the boys' club of mid-level managers pushed back. And who led that fraternity? You guessed it, Mr. Brandon Lewis himself. Brandon was the kind of guy who wore his ID badge on weekends just in case anyone forgot he had a title. His department was a soap opera. Endless expense reports, inflated figures, networking dinners that looked suspiciously like golf trips to Vegas. Patricia had files on all of it, but no authority to act. Now, with me as the invisible hand pulling the strings, the cleanup could finally begin. I remember the first time I visited the bank after the acquisition. I walked in as a consultant under Reyes Financial. The lobby had that sterile corporate look. White marble floors, fake smiles, and motivational posters that lied to employees. Integrity, innovation, teamwork. Sure, maybe in an alternate universe. I shook hands with Patricia in her glass office overlooking downtown. You really bought this place? She whispered. You could have chosen a less dramatic midlife crisis. I grinned. I don't do golf or therapy, Patricia. This is cheaper than both. She laughed, but gave me a look that said, You're enjoying this too much. I was. Fast forward to that Friday night at the Sterling Lounge. The whiskey, the mockery, the bad haircuts. Watching Brandon toast to men who actually work for a living was like watching a man confidently walk into a trap I'd built myself. After that night, I decided it was time to stop being the invisible hand and start tightening the grip. That Monday morning, I called James. Let's accelerate the audit schedule, I said. He sighed. You mean the purge? Semantics, I replied. We went through internal reports, emails, invoices, expense logs. What we found was comedy gold disguised as corporate incompetence. Brandon had approved loans to personal friends with zero collateral. Tom, the head of loans, claimed reimbursements for client dinners that included $900 wine bottles and hotel stays in Miami. Then there was Eric, their operations manager, who had the gall to charge a weekend at Caesar's Palace to the company under team building. I almost wanted to congratulate them for creativities. Are you sure you want to expose them all at once? Patricia asked during a meeting in her office. Why not? I shrugged. It'll save on popcorn. She chuckled, shaking her head. You've got that look again. What look? The one people get before they flip a chessboard just to prove they can. She wasn't wrong. We set the executive review meeting for the following Thursday. Brandon and his cronies were told it was just a quarterly performance check. They had no clue their careers were about to be publicly incinerated. The morning of the meeting, I walked into the building wearing a tailored navy suit. My reflection in the elevator doors looked calm, confident, dangerous. I carried my laptop under one arm, the digital sword that would slice through years of corporate nonsense. When the elevator doors opened onto the 17th floor, I stepped into a conference room that smelled like arrogance and overpriced coffee. Brandon was already there, chatting loudly with Tom and Eric. "Heard we've got some big investor joining us today," he said. "Hopefully someone who knows real banking, not another tech guy who thinks apps can replace experience." Patricia met my eyes across the room and fought the urge to smile. I took a seat at the far end of the table, introduced only as a major investor. No one bothered to shake my hand. Brandon glanced at me once, shrugged, and turned back to his PowerPoint presentation like I was an intern. He started talking, voice booming with fake confidence. "Prime Union's trajectory this quarter has been incredible. We're seeing strong leadership and record profits." That's when I raised my hand. "Mind if I take a look at those numbers?" He paused mid-sentence, clearly annoyed. Sure, it's all proprietary, though." "Don't worry," I said. "I'm very familiar with proprietary data." I stood, walked to the front, and connected my laptop to the projector. The screen flickered, and suddenly all their secrets were on display. Real numbers, declining profits, employee complaints, misuse of funds. Brandon's smile faltered. Tom went pale. Eric looked like he was reconsidering his life choices. Patricia leaned back, arms crossed, letting me do what she'd wanted to do for years. Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "this is what happens when leadership confuses confidence with competence. You call this record performance? I call it financial malpractice." Brandon stammered. "Well, who do you think you are?" I smiled. "Oh, that's right. I forgot to introduce myself properly." I closed the laptop, looked around the room, and said, "I'm Elliot Reyes, owner of Reyes Financial Group, the company that owns Prime Union Bank." The silence that followed could have been bottled and sold as a stress reliever. Brandon's jaw dropped. Tom muttered something that sounded like a prayer. Eric actually whispered, "Holy crap." Brandon recovered first, or tried to. "This is a joke," he said, forcing a laugh. "You're bluffing. Check the paperwork," I replied calmly. "Page 3, Section 8. You'll find my name there, right next to the part that says I can terminate executives for cause." Patricia slid the document across the table like a magician revealing her final trick. Brandon picked it up with trembling hands, his face drained of color as he read. I stepped closer. "Effective immediately, you, Tom, and Eric are terminated for unethical practices and falsifying internal reports. Security will escort you out. You'll receive your final paychecks after deductions for your extracurricular activities." Right on cue, 2 security officers appeared at the door. Brandon stood, trying to regain dignity he'd already lost. "This is outrageous," he shouted. I smirked. "What's outrageous is expensing a Vegas trip as team morale development." Tom tried to slip his phone into his pocket. The security guard stopped him. Eric didn't move at all. He just sat there, whispering, "I should have stayed in accounting." As they were escorted out, Brandon turned back, fuming. "You think this is over, Reyes? You think you can humiliate me?" "Oh, Brandon," I said, smiling softly. "You already did that yourself. I'm just cleaning up the mess." When the door shut behind them, the room erupted, not in chaos, but in applause. Employees who'd been silent for years clapped quietly at first, then louder. Patricia looked at me, half amused, half relieved. "Well," she said, "that was dramatic." "Understatement," I replied. That night, I walked out of the building into the crisp evening air, feeling lighter than I had in years. There was no celebration, no press statement, no public announcement. Just a man, his ex-wife's husband's bank, and the satisfying sound of poetic justice finally balancing the books. As I got into my car, I thought about Clara. She was probably at home, blissfully unaware that her new husband had just been fired by her old one. Somewhere deep inside, I felt the faintest pang of sympathy for her. Then I remembered her giggling that night at the Sterling Lounge, watching Brandon make jokes at my expense, and the sympathy evaporated like cheap perfume. I wasn't out for blood, I was out for balance, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt perfectly even. Sleep is supposed to reset your mind, right? Not mine. That night, I tossed and turned like my bed was made of unfinished business. Every insult from that bar replayed in my head. The smug laughter, the clinking glasses, the fake pity from a man who thought assets meant his Rolex collection. By 2 o'clock a.m., I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling, planning something that wasn't quite revenge, but definitely wasn't forgiveness either. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was my lawyer, James, responding to a text I'd sent hours ago. "You awake?" "Let me guess," he said when I called. "You're not calling to discuss your sleep hygiene." "Brandon Lewis," I said flatly. He sighed. I was afraid of that. What did he do this time? Nothing new, just confirmed he's still an idiot. Ah, so the usual. What's the move? The move, I said, sitting up, is silent but savage. There was a pause. You know you say that every time you're about to do something completely insane, right? That's because insanity works, I replied. And it's fun. By the next morning, I was in full CEO mode. Black coffee, rolled up sleeves, and a stack of internal reports taller than my moral flexibility. Patricia Moore met me in the executive office of Prime Union, looking both amused and slightly terrified. "I know that look," she said. "You're about to break something, aren't you?" "Not break," I said, flipping through a file. "Restructure, efficiently, publicly, brutally." Patricia smiled faintly. "You're enjoying this way too much." "I've earned it," I said. The first step of Operation Silent Savage was simple: information. If you want to bring down a castle, you don't storm the gates, you study the plumbing. James sent me everything he'd gathered on Brandon and his little frat house of finance. Falsified reimbursements, fake charity donations, credit cards that looked like personal piggy banks. My favorite was a receipt for a client development retreat in Vegas that included a charge for a private magician. Who hires a magician to improve their lending department? Apparently this guy does, James said. Also, you'll love this. He listed it under staff motivation. Yeah, I said, because nothing motivates employees like disappearing their integrity. Patricia wasn't exaggerating when she said she'd been blocked before. The old board loved Brandon's personality. He made them feel relevant. He had that fake leadership charm, firm handshakes, motivational quotes stolen from LinkedIn, and the emotional depth of a puddle. Every time Patricia tried to enforce accountability, the board would say, "Brandon's got heart. He's a people person." Well, now he was about to be a jobless person. I told Patricia to set up an executive performance review for Thursday morning. She nodded slowly, a grin forming. "You really want to do this in front of the entire board?" "Oh, absolutely," I said. "If we're going to clean house, we might as well make it a corporate baptism." The days leading up to that meeting felt electric. My phone buzzed nonstop, investors calling, employees gossiping, and somewhere in between, Claire's name popped up in my inbox. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew what it said. Something halfway between nostalgia and self-preservation. Instead, I buried myself in prep. James came by my office, leaning against the doorframe like a man bracing for impact. "So," he said, "you're actually going to confront them personally?" "Yes," he shook his head. Most billionaires would just quietly fire people through HR. Most billionaires didn't get laughed at by a room full of people wearing discount cologne," I said. He smirked. "Fair point." "Want me to bring popcorn?" "Bring a mop," I said. "It's going to get messy." The night before the meeting, I drove by the Sterling Lounge again, and it was almost poetic. Same jazz music, same overpriced whiskey, same neon sign flickering like an apology. I parked across the street and watched through the window. Brandon was there again, of course, holding court with his crew like a man who still thought the world ran on charm instead of consequences. He threw his head back, laughing, probably retelling the story of the broke tech guy he'd humiliated. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. I just smiled. Tomorrow, the punchline would be mine. Thursday arrived with the kind of morning energy usually reserved for soap opera finales. The conference room was spotless, too spotless, like it knew drama was coming. I sat beside Patricia at the head of the table, flipping casually through the presentation slides Brandon had prepared. Every chart was exaggerated, every number fluffed. "Creative accounting," Patricia murmured. "Creative," I agreed, "but not clever." When Brandon entered, he looked confident, maybe even cocky. He shook hands with board members, flashing that toothpaste commercial smile. "Morning, team," he said. "I think you're all going to be impressed with what we've accomplished this quarter." Patricia smirked. "I'm sure we will." He launched into his presentation, talking about record profits, strong leadership, employee satisfaction. I swear if corporate jargon were currency, this man would have been a billionaire. I watched him strut in front of the projector, pointer in hand, acting like a motivational speaker with a fragile ego. Then I interrupted. "That's an interesting chart," I said. "Where did you get the data?" Brandon turned, startled but still smug. "Straight from internal analytics," he said. "Compiled by my team." "Oh, the same team that spent company money at Caesar's Palace?" I asked. Laughter rippled nervously through the room. Brandon frowned. "Excuse me?" I stood. "Actually, let me help you out. I brought some updated numbers." The projector flickered and up came a new slide. Real data this time. Declining client satisfaction. Loan fraud. Personal reimbursements. And at the bottom, an image of Brandon's expense report, complete with his signature next to a line item reading, "Magician, Team Development." The room went dead silent. Patricia folded her hands, stone-faced. "I believe Mr. Reyes has something to share," she said. Brandon blinked. "Reyes?" He turned toward me, clearly confused. "You mean like the investor? Wait, you own the bank," I finished. "Yes." He froze. You could almost hear his confidence shatter. "You're lying." "I wish I was," I said. "But the paperwork says otherwise. Reyes Financial Group acquired Prime Union 3 months ago. And you, Mr. Lewis, have been one of my more entertaining employees." One of the board members coughed to hide a laugh. Brandon stammered. This is insane. You can't just come in here and terminate you?" I asked. "Actually, I can. Effective immediately. For a cause." Two security officers appeared at the door, silent as ghosts. Brandon's face turned the color of bad coffee. He looked at Patricia for backup, but she just smiled. "I tried to warn you," she said. Tom, the loanhead, tried to stand up, muttering something about misunderstandings, but his face was already on the next slide. Vegas receipts, fake expense claims, and a client dinner with no clients present. Eric followed, his tab labeled Wellness Retreat, Miami. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The calm in my tone did all the heavy lifting. "You know," I said, "when you're responsible for other people's money, there's this little thing called integrity. You might have heard of it. Usually comes right before unemployment." Brandon slammed his hand on the table. "This isn't over." I tilted my head. "You're right, it's not. You still have to turn in your company laptop." Even Patricia laughed at that one. When the guards escorted them out, the air in the room shifted. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of the analysts at the end of the table, Linda Ramos, a quiet woman I'd noticed before, started clapping. It spread like wildfire. Within seconds, the entire staff was applauding. Patricia leaned over and whispered, "I think you just became a legend." "I don't want to be a legend," I said. "I want a clean balance sheet." "Same thing," she said, smiling. Later that evening, James called. "So, how'd it go?" "Like a dream," I said. "If the dream involved public executions and HR paperwork." He chuckled. "You know, I almost feel bad for the guy." "Don't," I said. "He earned every minute of that downfall." That night, I poured myself a drink. Not whiskey this time, but rum, something smoother. I sat on the balcony of my penthouse overlooking the city lights. Below me were thousands of people, finishing their work days, rushing home, unaware that one of their banks had just changed forever. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "You didn't have to do that." "Clara." "Of course." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then replied, "Didn't have to, wanted to." Her reply came minutes later. "You really haven't changed." I smiled, typing one last message before setting my phone down. "No, Clara, I finally have." Then I leaned back. The city hummed below me, blending with the quiet satisfaction in my chest. For once, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel hurt. I just felt balanced, like life had finally, after all its detours, decided to hand me the scales. And somewhere out there, Brandon Lewis was staring at a termination letter with my name on it, wondering how the man he'd mocked in a bar became the ghost who owned his downfall. That's the beauty of silent plans. No noise, no warning, just the sweet sound of checkmate. There's a specific kind of tension you can taste in the air before a corporate ambush, somewhere between burnt coffee and impending unemployment. That was the atmosphere inside Prime Union Bank's 17th floor conference room the morning of the executive review. If someone had bottled the mix of anxiety, arrogance, and cheap cologne in that room, it would have sold out in every mid-level management seminar across the country. I arrived early because if you're going to ruin someone's professional life, punctuality is just good manners. Patricia Moore, the CEO, sat beside me pretending to check her tablet. She wasn't nervous. She was excited. Patricia had been fighting for reform for years, but the old board never backed her. Now she had something better than board support. Me. The quiet, invisible owner with a grudge and a plan. Ready? She whispered, glancing at the door. Born ready, I said, straightening my tie. Let's call it a performance review with fireworks. By 9 o'clock a.m., the room filled up. Brandon Lewis entered first, all swagger and teeth, like a man walking onto a stage he thought belonged to him. His navy suit looked expensive, probably because it was. Bought with bonus money from fake expense claims, no doubt. He gave Patricia one of those condescending nods men give women in power when they still think they're in charge. Morning, Patricia, he said smoothly. I assume you've got our quarterly victory speech ready? She smiled. Something like that. Behind him trailed the rest of his entourage. Tom, the head of loans, who'd never met an ethics code he couldn't reinterpret, and Eric Blaye, the operations manager who confused team bonding with Vegas. They took their seats loud and confident, blissfully unaware that they were about to audition for unemployment. Brandon started the meeting, clicking through slides with all the confidence of a TED Talk reject. Our numbers this quarter have been outstanding, he announced. Prime Union is stronger than ever thanks to our leadership team. Patricia raised an eyebrow. Outstanding? He nodded proudly. Absolutely. Client satisfaction's up, expenses are down, and morale is through the roof. I nearly laughed out loud. If morale were any higher, half the staff wouldn't have been secretly job hunting on LinkedIn. I leaned back listening as he bragged about strategic decisions and visionary management. Every word was corporate poetry, elegant, hollow, and fake. May I said suddenly, interrupting him mid-sentence. Brandon glanced at me, dismissive. Sure, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name earlier. Elliot, I said with a polite smile. Just Elliot. I stood, laptop in hand, and walked to the front. The projector flickered, replacing Brandon's slideshow of lies with one titled Internal Reality Check. Interesting presentation, Brandon, I began, but I thought the team might appreciate a clearer picture of what's really happening here. The first slide appeared, a graph showing plummeting customer retention. The next, an expense audit. Then came the pièce de resistance, a photo of Brandon and Tom at Caesar's Palace, drinks in hand under a banner reading Team Building Weekend. You could hear a pin drop. What the hell is this? Brandon snapped. Receipts, I said calmly. Literally. He turned red. This is taken out of context. Oh, don't worry, I said, and there's plenty more context. Click. Another slide. Employee complaints, anonymous reports of toxic management, favoritism, and inappropriate expenditures. Then came Tom's masterpiece, a 4,800 charge labeled Client Relations Dinner, which, as it turned out, took place in Miami with 0 clients and 1 blackjack dealer. Patricia sat back, letting me work. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't have to. My words cut quietly, surgically, leaving no room for denial. Prime Union's problem, I said, isn't market competition or economic pressure. It's internal rot. Leadership that mistakes confidence for competence. Executives who spend more time networking at bars than leading their teams. I turned off the projector. The silence was beautiful, the kind of silence you only get when everyone realizes the party's over. Brandon finally spoke, his voice shaky. Who do you think you are? I smiled. Funny you should ask, I'm the guy who owns this bank. That hit like a financial nuke. The room collectively froze. Patricia hid a smirk behind her coffee mug. Brandon blinked. You're joking. Nope, I said. Reyes Financial Group. Ring any bells? The holding company that bought Prime Union 3 months ago? That's me. Tom's face drained of color. Eric looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and join customer support. Brandon tried to laugh it off. You mean to tell me you came here? To my meeting just to flex? Oh no. I said, and came to clean house. I opened a folder on the table and began sliding termination letters one by one toward them. Each neatly typed, signed, and dated. Brandon Lewis, termination for misconduct, falsification of financial records, and misuse of company funds. Effective immediately. Tom Richards, same. Eric Lang, same. Brandon slammed his hand down. You can't do this. I can, I said, and I already have. Patricia, right on cue, the double doors opened. Two security officers stepped in, polite, professional, and ready. Brandon's voice rose. This is outrageous. You think you can humiliate me in front of my team? No, I said calmly. You did that yourself. I'm just adding punctuation. Patricia stood. Gentlemen, you can collect your belongings from HR. Tom muttered something about legal action as security escorted him out. Eric kept his head down. Brandon paused at the door, turning back to me. This isn't over, Reyes. I tilted my head. You're right, it's not. You still have to return your company car. That earned a small chuckle from Patricia. When the door finally closed behind them, she let out a long exhale. You know, she said, I've been waiting years for this day. I smiled, happy to make dreams come true. She laughed. So what now? We rebuild? From the ground up, I said. No more flash, no more fraud. We turn this place into what it was supposed to be, a real bank, not a social club. Patricia leaned forward. You realize word's going to spread, right? You'll be the talk of the industry by noon. Good, I said. Maybe it'll scare a few more people into doing their jobs. The rest of the day was chaos and slow motion. HR processed termination, IT cut off access, and half the office whispered about what had just gone down. Some cheered, some panicked. Most just looked relieved. For years, Brandon's reign had been one long episode of corporate survivor. And now the island finally had a new host. By 4 p.m., the building felt different, lighter. Patricia walked into my office holding 2 coffees. You really shook the place, she said, handing me one. Good. It needed shaking. She nodded. The employees are already talking. I think they're hopeful. Hope's good, I said. Let's just make sure it's earned. That night when I left the building, I didn't feel the high I expected. No adrenaline rush, no gloating satisfaction. Just quiet relief. Like setting down a heavy box you'd been carrying too long. The streetlights flickered against the glass windows, reflecting my silhouette. A man who'd finally balanced a very personal ledger. On the drive home, my phone buzzed with messages. Some from Patricia, some from investors, and one from an unknown number. I shouldn't have needed to check the area code to know who it was. I heard what happened. Clara. I stared at the message, debating. Finally, I typed back. Then you know the truth. Her reply came fast. I didn't know he was like that. I'm sorry. I almost laughed. Not out of humor, out of exhaustion. People like Clara never see the rot until it ruins the furniture. I considered replying with something sharp. You sure you're sorry about him or about the lifestyle that came with him? But I didn't. I deleted the draft and put my phone away. Silence can be louder than words. When I pulled into my driveway, the night was still. My house, my home finally free of ghosts from the past, stood like a fortress of calm. I poured myself a drink, sat on the couch, and thought about how poetic it all was. A man once mocked me for being a nobody. Now his name was on a termination notice with my signature. Karma didn't always need to shout. Sometimes it just needed a conference room and a well-timed PowerPoint. By midnight, I was finally ready to sleep, really sleep, for the first time in months. I didn't dream about revenge or success or Clara. I dreamed about peace. And when I woke up the next morning, that peace still lingered, soft and quiet, like background music to a life finally back in tune. There's no sound quite like corporate gossip moving through a building. It's not talking, not quite whispering, but something in between, a hum, like bees that suddenly realized they're free. The morning after the firings, that hum was everywhere. You could feel it in the elevators, in the break room, even in the way people typed. Faster, freer, lighter. Prime Union Bank didn't just breathe again. It exhaled 3 years of tension. And every single exhale sounded a lot like, finally. I showed up late that day, not because I wanted to, but because I could. Walking through the lobby was surreal. The same employees who used to avoid eye contact with executives now nodded and smiled. One security guard, the same guy who'd escorted Brandon out the day before, gave me a subtle salute. Good morning, Mr. Reyes, he said. Hell of a day yesterday, I grinned. Let's hope today's quieter. Upstairs, Patricia was already in action. She had her sleeves rolled up, her coffee black, and a look that screamed efficiency. "You're trending," she said the moment I walked into her office. "Trending?" She spun her laptop toward me. Someone had leaked a clip from the meeting, the moment I introduced myself as the owner. It had gone viral on LinkedIn of all places. The caption read, "When the quiet investor isn't so quiet anymore." The comments were a mix of shock, applause, and people claiming they'd always suspected Brandon was shady. Of course they did. People have perfect hindsight when it's safe. Patricia smirked. "You're basically a meme now. The internet loves poetic justice." I shrugged. "Good for them. I'm not doing interviews." "Oh, don't worry." She said, "They'll move on. They always do, but internally?" She leaned forward. "You've got a staff that finally believes things can change. That's worth more than any headline." She was right. The next few days were chaos wrapped in gratitude, and departments were reorganized, new policies implemented, and for the first time in a decade, people weren't terrified to speak their minds. One by one, employees came up to me, some nervous, some tearful, all genuine. "Thank you, Mr. Reyes," said a young woman named Lydia from customer service. "I've worked here 6 years, and it's never felt like this." Then came Linda Ramos, the loan officer I'd noticed before, the one Brandon used to bully during meetings, cutting her off mid-sentence like her opinions were spam emails. I remembered her because she had that quiet resilience, the kind of person who survives bad management without becoming bitter. Patricia called me into her office one afternoon. Linda was there looking stunned. "Elliot," Patricia said, "I believe you know Linda." "Of course," I said. "You were the one who caught that fake client account last quarter, weren't you?" She nodded timidly. "Yes, sir." Patricia smiled. "We'd like to make her the new branch manager." Linda blinked, speechless. "Me?" "Yes, you," I said. "You've earned it." She actually started crying. Real tears, not performative ones. "No one ever believed in me," she whispered. I smiled. "Well, believe it now. You're running this place." It was one of those moments that reminded me why I'd started building businesses in the first place. Not for revenge, not for money, but for that, the chance to put the right people in the right seats. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Some of Brandon's old allies tried to stay under the radar, hoping the storm would pass. But James, my lawyer slash corporate bloodhound, was already combing through every department. "You want full accountability, right?" he said over the phone. "Then buckle up. I'm finding skeletons in closets that haven't been opened since 2009. "Good," I said. "Air them all out." He laughed. "You're terrifying when you're calm, you know that?" "Occupational hazard," I replied. By the end of the week, the bank looked completely different. The energy was contagious. People stayed late not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Meetings were productive instead of performative. For once, Prime Union actually lived up to its slogan: integrity, trust, accountability. 3 words Brandon probably thought were just for the commercials. Then, out of nowhere, Claire texted me. The notification popped up while I was reviewing reports. "I heard what happened." "I didn't know Brandon was like that. I'm sorry." I stared at the message for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard. There was a time when that kind of apology would have cracked something inside me. Some soft corners still holding on to nostalgia. But now, it barely moved the needle. I typed a response. "We all learn who people really are eventually." Then deleted it. Too gracious. I tried again. "I'm sure you'll land on your feet." Too sarcastic. In the end, I didn't reply at all. Because silence, when properly timed, is louder than any insult. That night, I found myself back at the Sterling Lounge, sitting in the same booth where it had all started. The same bartender recognized me and smiled. "You're the guy from that video, right?" "Apparently," I said, sipping my drink. He chuckled. "Man, you handled that like a pro. That dude had it coming." "Most do," I said. Halfway through my second glass, someone approached. It was Linda again, this time in civilian clothes, her hair down, her confidence showing. "I didn't think I'd run into you here," she said, smiling nervously. "Guess I'm predictable," I said. "Whiskey and irony are kind of my thing." She laughed, then grew serious. "I just wanted to thank you again. You didn't have to do what you did." "Sure I did," I said. "No one else was going to." She nodded. Still, you gave people hope. It's been a long time since anyone around here believed in fairness. I looked at her for a moment. There was something grounding about her honesty. No agenda, no charm offensive, just sincerity. Fairness, I said. Not exactly a popular concept in banking. Maybe that's why we need it, she replied. We talked for an hour. About the industry, about life, about how exhausting it is to constantly prove yourself to people who only see numbers. When she left, I realized something strange. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the villain in my own story. The next morning, Patricia called me into her office again. We have a problem, she said, sliding her tablet toward me. It was a news headline. Disgraced banker. Brandon Lewis files for unemployment, claims wrongful termination. I groaned. Of course he does. James called not 5 minutes later. I just read it. Want me to respond? No, I said. Let him shout into the void. The more noise he makes, the worse he looks. Why? James said. Still, the board's nervous. Public drama isn't their style. Then they should have hired quieter idiots, I said. We both laughed. Later that day, Patricia updated me. Brandon had tried contacting old board members, hoping to rally support. None answered. Turns out loyalty disappears fast when your Amex card stops working. As the week ended, the storm began to settle. The news cycle moved on, investors regained confidence, and morale hit a record high. I walked through the building on Friday evening, past the desks of people who were smiling again. It was strange. These weren't just employees anymore. They were believers. Linda caught me near the elevators. We're all going out tonight, she said. Drinks at the Sterling. You should join? I smirked. Tempting, but I think I've hit my monthly irony quota, she laughed. Your loss. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of my reflection. Same face, same eyes, but something different in the expression. Lighter. Maybe that's what peace looks like when you finally earn it. That night I got home, made myself a drink, and sat by the window overlooking the city. The lights below flickered like 1,000 tiny possibilities. I thought about Clara again, not out of pain, but curiosity. How strange it was that people could share years of life, then drift into different orbits, only colliding again when fate felt dramatic. My phone buzzed once more. Another message, from an unknown number this time. Brandon's been drinking. He keeps talking about you, probably one of his old buddies. I put the phone down. Not my problem anymore. I'd spent too long living in the past. The future was finally interesting again. I raised my glass toward the skyline and whispered, to quiet victories. Because that's what this was. Not revenge, not payback. Just a quiet victory. A course correction in a universe that sometimes forgets to balance its own books. And this time I was the accountant. If there's one universal truth about people who get caught, it's that they all think there's still a comeback tour waiting for them. Brandon Lewis was no exception. Within 72 hours of being escorted out of Prime Union Bank, the man had gone from denial to desperation to full-blown delusion. And somehow I was his favorite audience. James, my lawyer, called first thing Monday morning. You're gonna love this, he said, his voice carrying that mix of the irritation and amusement that only corporate drama can cause. Your buddy Brandon called my office, said he wants to speak to you directly. Something about a misunderstanding. I snorted. Yeah, misunderstanding as in, I misunderstood the part where embezzling was illegal. What did you tell him? That you'd think about it, James replied smoothly. Good man, I said, which I won't. He chuckled. Oh, I know. But watching him squirm while waiting for an answer? Priceless. When I got to the bank, Patricia met me in the hallway, holding a latte like it was an Olympic torch of caffeine and sarcasm. Guess who called HR this morning? She asked. I raised a brow. Brandon? Bingo. Apparently, he thinks he can smooth things over if he talks to the right people. He even offered to take a pay cut. I laughed. He can keep cutting until it hits zero. I already helped him out with that part. Patricia smirked. You're enjoying this? Immensely, I said, but not for the reasons you think. Because honestly, this wasn't about revenge anymore. It had morphed into something more satisfying. Accountability. Watching karma punch the time clock for overtime. The day rolled on like any other, except for the fact that every other email in my inbox contained a headline about Prime Union's leadership shakeup. Some financial blogs were calling it the corporate purge. One even used a photo of me in the article. They'd caught me mid-blink, making me look like I was plotting world domination, not entirely inaccurate. By noon, I was sitting in the boardroom with Patricia and a few department heads reviewing quarterly projections. The new management was already working miracles. Linda Ramos, our freshly promoted branch manager, was killing it. Loan approvals were up. Customer satisfaction had skyrocketed. The toxic culture Brandon had built was evaporating faster than his LinkedIn endorsements. Patricia flipped through the reports, smiling. "You know," she said, "you might have done in 1 week what I couldn't in 5 years." "Don't give me too much credit," I said. "You were the one trying to clean this place while they were busy hosting poker nights on the company dime." "True," she said, chuckling, "but it's easier to enforce ethics when the guy at the top actually believes in them." Before I could reply, my phone buzzed again. "James." Of course." "Talk to me," I said, answering mid-meeting. "You're not going to like this," he said. "Try me." Brandon's filed a formal complaint with the Department of Labor. Claims wrongful termination and emotional distress. Says he was targeted due to personal bias. I nearly laughed coffee out my nose. Personal bias? What bias? I hated him professionally, too. James snorted. "I figured you'd say that. Don't worry, it's going nowhere. We've got the receipts, but you might want to know he's been reaching out to reporters." Of course he was. Some people can't accept a fall without a spotlight. After the call, Patricia glanced at me. "Everything okay?" "Just Brandon trying to redefine damage control." "Gunshunchery," I said. "He's like a raccoon in a trash fire. Too dumb to stop. Too stubborn to die." She laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. You know, I miss this energy in leadership. By mid-afternoon, the news started breaking in waves. Headlines like, "Disgraced banker fights back," and "Brandon Lewis speaks out." He gave an interview to a local business channel, wearing a wrinkled suit and the world's most insincere expression of regret. "I was blindsided," he said to the camera. "After years of service, they replaced loyalty with humiliation. This wasn't about ethics. This was personal." I turned down the volume and watched his face without sound. It was almost artistic. The subtle twitch in his jaw, the desperate glint in his eyes. The man wasn't apologizing. He was auditioning. Patricia walked in halfway through. "He's really doing the poor me routine?" "Yep," said. "He's one sad violin away from an Oscar." "He's not even good at it," she said, shaking her head. "He's crying about loyalty when he literally billed a magician to the company." That made me laugh. To be fair, he probably thought the magician could make the evidence disappear. By the next morning, the public was already over it. The internet's attention span is shorter than Brandon's temper. The article stopped trending, and the focus shifted to the bank's new direction. Our PR team handled it masterfully, emphasizing transparency, employee empowerment, and community rebuilding. We even announced a scholarship fund for underprivileged students pursuing finance degrees. The same day that news hit, Prime Union's stock price jumped 12%. Brandon's little media stunt, forgotten. The only thing he'd successfully accomplished was getting his face memed into oblivion. My favorite one had his quote, "This was personal," pasted over a photo of me smiling at a press conference with the caption, "It's only personal if you get caught." A week later, James called again. "So, Brandon dropped the complaint." "Already?" I asked. "Yeah, probably realized he'd need to explain the receipts you leaked. Sorry, I mean the ones that mysteriously found their way to the press." I feigned innocence. "Leaks happen, public interest and all that." James chuckled. "Right, and I suppose the public just happened to find his expense report interesting." "It's not my fault people appreciate transparency," he sighed. "You're enjoying this too much." "Correction," I said. "I'm enjoying the symmetry." After the dust settled, the real work began. Patricia and I spent weeks restructuring the organization. We implemented employee profit sharing, revamped HR policies, and established an anonymous reporting line for ethical concerns. You know, the kind of stuff every corporate website claims to value but rarely enforces. And people noticed. The mood was different now. Staff lunches turned into brainstorming sessions. Managers actually listened. It was the kind of workplace I wished existed when I was building my first startup. Driven, fair, and human. One afternoon, Linda stopped by my office. She looked nervous but determined. Mr. Reyes, I just wanted to say thank you again. You changed everything here. I smiled. I didn't change anything. I just cleared the path. You all did the work. She hesitated, then said quietly, Still, it's nice to finally work somewhere that doesn't make you dread Mondays. When she left, I sat there staring at the view from my office window. The skyline shimmered in the distance, and for once I felt something I hadn't in years, calm. Not the artificial calm of success or victory, but the real kind. The kind that comes when you know you've done something right, even if it started from something wrong. That evening, as I walked out of the building, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unfamiliar number. You ruined me. No name, but I didn't need one. I typed back, You did that yourself. Then I deleted the thread. Because closure doesn't always need to be poetic. Sometimes it's just a clean inbox. From there, Prime Union thrived. Investors came back. Clients returned. Even the media started calling us a model of corporate redemption. I hated the phrasing. It sounded like we'd joined a reality show for repentant CEOs, but I couldn't deny the progress. One Friday evening, I found myself back at the Sterling Lounge. Not out of nostalgia this time, but curiosity. The same bartender spotted me and grinned. Back again, huh? Guess I like full circles, I said. He poured my usual and nodded toward the TV above the bar. Hey, that's your bank, right? They're talking about you guys again. I looked up. The headline read, Prime Union Bank, from scandal to success story. I raised my glass to the screen. To recovery, I muttered. As the whiskey burned its way down, I thought about everything that had led to that moment. The humiliation, the anger, the late-night plotting. Funny how something that started with spite ended in stability. By the time I left, the streets were quiet. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement, blurring into streaks of gold and blue. I stopped for a moment, hands in my pockets, and took it all in. The irony, the peace, the strange sense of justice. Because in the end, I didn't need to ruin Brandon Lewis. I just needed to remove him from my orbit and let the universe do what it does best. Balance itself. And damn, it did it beautifully. They say you never really see your past coming until it's standing in front of you, holding a to-go cup and pretending everything's fine. For me, that moment arrived on a rainy Wednesday morning at a downtown cafe. I was there for caffeine and quiet. Instead, I got Clara. She looked like nostalgia wrapped in bad timing. Same sleek hair, same I read self-help books now smile. Only difference was the exhaustion in her eyes, the kind that comes from loving someone who spends more time blaming the universe than paying the bills. She spotted me before I could duck behind the pastry case. Elliot? Great, no escape. Clara, I said, forcing a polite grin. Wow, long time. 3 years, she said instantly, like she'd been keeping score. Mind if I sit? I gestured to the chair across from me. It's a free country. Well, except for bank fraud. She winced. You saw the news. Hard to miss when your ex-wife's husband becomes a public service announcement for ethics. She sighed. He wasn't all bad, you know. I took a slow sip of coffee. Sure, serial killers probably tip well, too. That earned me a glare. For a moment, she looked like the old Clara, the one who used to debate me into corners and then kiss me there. But this time she didn't fight. She looked tired. You always use humor when you're hurt. Only when it's free entertainment, I said. So, how's Brandon handling unemployment? Her jaw tightened. You don't have to enjoy this. I'm not, I said honestly. Enjoyment requires effort. I'm just observing the natural consequences of bad math. She stirred her latte in silence, the spoon clinking softly. He started drinking, she finally said. A lot. He blames everyone but himself. The media? Patricia, you... Of course he does, I said. Accountability's not his love language. She gave a small, humorless laugh. I guess I deserve that. I leaned back. You don't deserve him, but you picked him, so that's on you. That landed. She stared at me, and for the first time since she walked in, I saw regret. Not the shallow kind people post online, but the deep, quiet kind that sits heavy behind the eyes. You were right, she said softly. About everything, about people like him, about me. That caught me off guard. About you? She nodded. You said once that I liked comfort more than challenge. I hated hearing that. But you were right. I wanted stability so badly, I mistook routine for love. I didn't know what to say. For years, I'd imagined this conversation, her realizing, apologizing, maybe even crying. But now that it was happening, it didn't feel like victory. It just felt done. I'm not here to make things weird, she continued. I just wanted to apologize for everything. I nodded slowly. Apology accepted. She looked surprised. Just like that? Yeah, I said. Holding grudges is expensive. I prefer long-term investments. That made her smile. A real one this time. You always did talk like a balance sheet. Occupational hazard, I said. There was a pause. Outside, rain tapped against the window like impatient fingers. Then she said it. Maybe you and I... No, I interrupted gently. Her eyes widened. I didn't even finish. You didn't have to, I said. That account's been permanently closed. The barista at the next table tried not to laugh, and Clara's cheeks flushed. I almost felt bad. Almost. Elliot, she said quietly, I'm not asking to get back together. I just thought maybe we could be friends. I looked at her for a long moment. Friends? Clara, we skipped friendship and went straight to shared assets. Going backwards would just confuse the paperwork. She sighed, defeated but strangely relieved. I guess I deserve that, too. I shrugged. Maybe, but look, I don't hate you. I never did. You just stopped being my peace, and I stopped pretending that was okay. She nodded, eyes glistening. You've changed. Not really, I said. I just stopped apologizing for being ambitious. We sat in silence for another minute, listening to the rain. She finally stood, adjusting her coat. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're doing well. I am too, I said. As she turned to leave, I called after her. Clara? She paused. Next time you choose someone, make sure they don't need you to shrink so they can feel tall. She gave a small, sad smile. Goodbye, Elliot. And that was it. No tears. No movie-style closure. Just two people who had finally run out of versions of each other. I sat there for a while after she left, watching the rain slide down the glass. The barista brought me a refill and whispered, Dude, that was savage. I chuckled. Nah, that was mercy. Later that day, I stopped by Prime Union. The place was buzzing with energy. Employees who used to avoid eye contact now greeted me like I was a coworker instead of a corporate overlord. Patricia waved me into her office, grinning. You look lighter, she said. I just deleted 5 years of emotional debt, I said. Feels nice. She laughed. Good, because we've got bigger things to focus on. The new mentorship program, Linda's running it. She's phenomenal. I nodded. She's earned it. Give her everything she needs. Patricia smirked. You really trust her? I trust competence, I said, and she's got it. We spent the next hour reviewing expansion plans. For the first time in a long time, work didn't feel like escape. It felt like purpose. Maybe that was the real revenge. Not proving people wrong, but proving yourself right. Around 6, I left the office and walked through downtown, umbrella in hand, feeling strangely peaceful. The storm had passed, literally and metaphorically. I stopped at a crosswalk and caught my reflection in a store window. The guy staring back didn't look angry anymore. He looked free. My phone buzzed, a text from James. Just got a call from Brandon's lawyer. He wants to settle privately. I laughed out loud in the rain. Tell him I already settled publicly. Then I put my phone away and kept walking. A week later, I got a letter, an actual handwritten letter, which was rare enough to make me curious. It was from Clara. Inside was a short note. Elliot, thank you for hearing me out. You were right. I chased safety and called it love. I hope you find someone who sees your ambition as passion, not distance. Take care, Clara. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my desk drawer. Not because it meant anything, but because it didn't. It was a relic now, proof that closure doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's just a few quiet words that no longer sting. The following Friday, Prime Union hosted a staff appreciation event. Nothing fancy, just pizza, music, and laughter in the atrium. Linda got up to give a short speech about teamwork and trust. Watching her speak, confident and unshakable, I felt proud in a way I hadn't since my first startup. Afterwards, she found me near the back. You know, she said, I think you've done more for this place than you realize. I smiled. Maybe, but it's people like you who make it work. She hesitated. You ever think about what's next after this? I looked around the room at the laughter, the energy, the lightness. Maybe not everything needs a next. Maybe some things just need time to be good. She smiled. That's rare coming from you. Don't tell anyone, I said. Ruins my reputation. We laughed, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to prove anything to Clara, to Brandon, to the world. The storm was over. The damage had been repaired. And somewhere in that quiet balance between past and future, I found peace. As I left the building that night, city lights reflecting off wet pavement, I thought about how far I'd come from that kid in Portland who sold refurbished phones to pay bills. Life had a strange way of circling back, testing you with the same people, same lessons, until you finally passed the exam. Claire's chapter was closed. Brandon's story had ended itself. And me, I was just getting started on the sequel, the one without ghosts. 6 months later, Prime Union Bank wasn't just functioning. It was thriving, like a phoenix that had eaten its competition and asked for dessert. The press couldn't get enough of it. From scandal to standard, one headline read. The redemption of Prime Union, said another. I preferred the part where I finally relax, but no one ever asked the guy who did the heavy lifting. The numbers were stunning. Profits were up 60%. Customer trust was through the roof, and for the first time in years, the company's slogan, integrity, trust, accountability, wasn't a lie. Patricia had turned into the kind of leader employees actually wanted to follow, not just tolerate. Linda, the new branch manager, was already a rising star, giving interviews about ethical transformation in modern banking. I sat in my office, reading one of those articles, and couldn't help but smile. It was ironic. Brandon once toasted to men who actually work for a living. Turns out, he'd been cheering for me the whole time. I was going through quarterly reports one afternoon when Patricia popped her head into my office. You've got a visitor, she said, smirking. Tell them to email me like a civilized person. Not this one. She brought cookies. Ah, the universal bribe. Tessa walked in, holding a small white box and a grin that could have been copyrighted. She was one of our senior accountants, a recent hire with a wicked sense of humor and a zero-tolerance policy for nonsense. She set the box down on my desk. These are homemade, she said. Don't worry, they're not poisoned. Unless you're gluten-free, in which case, Godspeed. I laughed. Thanks, Tessa. I needed the sugar rush. These reports are trying to kill me. She sat across from me, folding her hands. So, you're the guy who bought his ex-wife's husband's bank, huh? I raised an eyebrow. Word travels fast. Please, she said. It's corporate folklore now. I heard you didn't even flinch when you fired him. I had practice, I said. Marriage is good training for that. She snorted. You know, most people would have rubbed it in her face, the ex, I mean. Tempting, I admitted, but silence is cheaper and lasts longer. Tessa smiled. Fair point. So what made you buy a bank anyway? Revenge or profit? Both, I said honestly. At first it was revenge, but now it's profit with purpose. She nodded thoughtfully. That's a dangerous combination. I know, I said. That's what makes it fun. We ended up talking for over an hour about business, life, and how both are just long games disguised as short ones. She was sharp, funny, and had this calm confidence that reminded me of myself before life started throwing curveballs. When she left, she said, Next time, I'm bringing coffee. You look like a man who overthinks spreadsheets. She wasn't wrong. As the months went by, the chaos faded into routine, except this time, it was the good kind. The kind where things work, people thrive, and I didn't have to constantly put out fires lit by idiots. Every morning, I'd come into the office to laughter instead of forced politeness. Linda's mentorship program was already expanding to new branches, and Patricia had started holding lunch with leadership sessions that didn't make employees want to fake food poisoning. It was strange. After years of fighting, fixing, and proving, I was finally content. Not ecstatic, not euphoric, just peacefully content. That's when I realized success isn't loud. It doesn't need to shout or sparkle. It just sits there quietly, nodding at you like, good job, you survived. One evening, I was locking up when Patricia stopped me in the hallway. You ever gonna let yourself take a vacation? She asked. I don't believe in those, I said. They're just emails with better scenery. Come on, Elliot, she said, grinning. You've earned one. The team can handle things without you for a week. I laughed. You say that now, but remember what happened when I let Brandon handle things for a week? Touché, she said. Still, at least think about it. Maybe go somewhere warm. Meet someone who isn't on payroll. Working on it, I said, thinking of Tessa and her cookies. That night, I went home to an apartment that finally felt like mine. Not a temporary stop between meetings, but a home. The city skyline glowed through the windows. I poured myself a drink and scrolled through my emails. Investors, journalists. One subject line caught my eye. You won. It was from James. Attached was the final settlement notice for Brandon's case. He'd officially withdrawn all claims. The message was short and sweet. No appeal. He's done. Enjoy the view. I smiled. I already am. The next morning, I drove to the bank early. The sun was just rising, painting the skyline gold. As I walked through the lobby, I passed the giant Prime Union billboard outside, the one Brandon had designed back in his I'm important days. It still read, trust, integrity, accountability. For the first time, I believed it. Later that week, Patricia called an all-staff meeting. The auditorium was full, the energy palpable. She got up on stage and announced that the bank had hit record-breaking profits. And it's all because we remembered that leadership isn't about titles, she said. It's about trust. The room erupted in applause. People clapped, whistled, cheered. Then someone shouted, "Speech from Mr. Reyes!" I wasn't prepared, but I walked up anyway. The microphone felt heavier than usual. You know, I started, I never planned to end up here. I built tech, not banks. But when I saw what this place could be, I realized something. Business isn't about revenge or reputation. It's about balance. The kind you can't put in a spreadsheet, the kind you earn by doing right by people. I looked out at them, faces smiling, hopeful, alive. You don't get second chances often in life, I continued. So when you do, make it count. And if someone ever tells you you're not enough, remember, you don't have to be loud to win. You just have to be right. The applause that followed was thunderous. Even Patricia wiped a tear discreetly. After the meeting, Linda found me backstage. You know, you're actually good at this leader thing, she said. Don't tell anyone, I said. I have a reputation as a cynic to maintain. She laughed. Too late. They love you. Later that evening, I found Tessa waiting outside my office, 2 coffees in hand. You killed that speech, she said. I winged it, I admitted. I usually charge extra for public speaking. She handed me a coffee. Then consider this your payment. Double shot latte with exactly 2 sugars, right? I blinked. How did you? Accounting, she said. We notice everything. We ended up walking out together, talking about nothing and everything. The city buzzed around us. Alive, messy, perfect. She told me about her plans to start a financial literacy program for underprivileged kids. I told her I'd fund it. She called me a show-off. I called her a troublemaker. It felt easy. The kind of easy that doesn't need translation. When we reached the parking lot, she turned to me. So, she said, smiling, what now for the guy who owns everything? Start over, I said. But this time, without needing to prove anything. She grinned. That's the best kind of success. I watched her drive off, then looked up at the night sky. The same skyline that once represented stress now just looked beautiful, peaceful, balanced. Standing there, I realized something important. Brandon's arrogance had given me motivation. Clara's betrayal had given me perspective. But rebuilding, quietly, steadily, honestly, had given me meaning. That's the part no one talks about in revenge stories. The end isn't about payback. It's about peace. The next morning, I got an email from Patricia. The subject line read simply, Legacy. Inside was a photo of the new company mural being installed in the lobby. It said, Prime Union Bank. People before profit. Underneath, in small letters, a quote from me. The real balance sheet isn't in your books. It's in how people remember you. I sat there staring at the image, smiling. For once, I didn't feel like correcting anyone. Revenge hadn't made me rich. Growth had. Forgiveness hadn't made me weak. It made me unstoppable. And in the end, the greatest ROI wasn't in dollars. It was in dignity. As I walked out of my office that afternoon, the world felt lighter. The staff waved, the lobby gleamed, and the air hummed with something rare in corporate life: hope. I paused by the door, glancing once more at the mural. Then I whispered to myself, now that's what I call interest well earned, and for the first time in a long time. I laughed. Not the bitter kind, not the hollow kind, just laughter. Real, full, free. Because the final entry on my life's ledger wasn't revenge or victory. It was peace. And that, I decided, was the only balance that ever really mattered.